to other news which affects you absolutely directly now. And the General Industry Workers Association of SA, GIWUSA, now planning a mass protest against the rising cost of living. I don't need to tell you about how the cost of food is going up, the cost of fuel is going up. A lot of it is because of the consequences of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but a lot of it is the underlying problems we have in our society. Mametlwe Sebei is the president of the General Industry Workers Union of SA. Mametlwe, good afternoon to you. What are you planning on doing this weekend? Why are you protesting?
No, we are planning having a meeting to which we are inviting all the trade unions in the country, the activists in communities, and young people that are also concerned about the rising cost of living. Because, Stephen, you'll agree with me, there's never been a time in our history, or at least within living memory, when it has been this expensive. I'm just talking about very basic commodities, things we need to survive, food, basic fuel, and everything that we really require on the day-to-day basis. It has never been this expensive to be poor. And this is a reason that we are saying the working class must organize. We are inviting all activists to gather on Saturday, the subject offices, to be able to discuss a way forward. We think a mass action is needed, and desperately and urgently so.
Who is the protest against? I mean, what action do you believe government should be taking? Let me put the question like that.
I mean, Stephen, the reality is that this cost, and what are we talking about? 40% increase in the price of fuel compared to last year, 50% increase in the price of sunflower. Now, it is true, a lot of these costs are imported. A lot of this inflation is important, but doesn't mean that government is completely impotent. But most importantly, this increase in cost of basic commodities is also because of profiteering that is actually taking place over and above the disruption in the supply chains that were caused firstly by COVID, now aggravated by the war in Ukraine and the sanctions that are imposed against Russia. And it doesn't mean in this case that government cannot do anything. You look at the issue of oil, one of the major suppliers of this oil is Sasol, which is a local privatized company that previously was owned by the state, built with investment from the public funds of the working class people in this country. What are we doing to ensure that we bring that company into public ownership, to ensure that we're able to subsidize the cost of fuel for a great majority of the working class people in this country? The price of food is profiteering by many of these food retailers, but also companies in that line of supply. And government has to intervene in the interest of the working class people and the poor.
So Mametlwe, I'll accept most of what you say on Sasol, but when you say that food companies are profiteering, do you have evidence of that? Really? Do you really have evidence of that? At this time, they would choose to do that. They say, by the way, that they've been absorbing increases for quite some time. That's what they say.
No, let me just give an example, right? Me and you recently were talking a lot about what is happening in Juba. Lots of these products are locally, manufactured. They are produced by the local farmers, although more and more of that is being imported. But the reality is that that company and many other giants within the food industry source their products locally, but they are taking advantage of the increases in the international market. There has been about 30%, of course, a rising cost of basic food globally, and they are taking advantage of that to raise their own prices, which is pure profiteering and has absolutely nothing to do with the war in Ukraine. And of course, that could be averted if only profiteering can be regulated, but you can't do that effectively on the basis of the private ownership and profiteering in this cooperation.
But Mametlwe, living costs are going up around the world. Food costs are going up around the world. Britain, the US, so many other countries have inflation figures they haven't seen in 10 years. Is every single food company around the world profiteering? Or is it because so much food which has been grown in Russia and Ukraine is not available on open markets?
There are, excuses that are going to be shown. But there are, for all the attacks that have been leveled against the working class, if you have read the report recently by Oxfam, it is said that this is the best of times for the billionaires across the world. Just in sub-Saharan Africa alone, in 2021, when many working class people have been hammered by the crisis of unemployment, of the rising cost of living, billionaires have increased their wealth by 15%. I can go on about record profiteering that is being registered by companies, including some of the big mining companies in this country, like Agro-Platinum and other things. One of the options is how can we, why can't we, for instance, tax, in this situation, introduce a special tax for those, for instance, big mining companies which have benefited from speculation that is taking place in the market, which is speculated from high prices of commodities to ensure that we subsidize the poor. So I'm arguing that the capitalist class, the big bosses, the big corporations are profiteering and are making huge amounts of profits from this crisis, while the masses of the working class, over 230 million people, are going to be plunged in poverty across the whole world as a result of the rising cost of living. And that we have got to respond to, and we need to be able to overcome.
Mametlwe, you're not going to find an argument from me on inequality. I mean, all the evidence is there. You're exactly right on what you say about the pandemic and deepening inequality. I would like to ask a separate question, though, which is that a lot of the short-term cost of what we're seeing in terms of the short-term reason for the increase in the price of fuel, the short-term reason for the increase in the price of food, is to do with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Our government has not condemned Russia's invasion. How do you see it?
Well, what you are seeing in Ukraine is an inter-imperialist rivalry for which the working class people, first and foremost of Ukraine, are paying dearly with their lives and brutalization, but also not a single corner of the planet is unaffected. All of us are paying the price through a rising cost of living. And the reality is, you have big powers fighting for a shrinking world market in order to secure profiteering for their big corporations. That is what is happening there. And of course, the ANC is trying to maneuver, between Russia and China, the bloc that is BRICS, which they are part of and increasingly dependent on. At the same time, not wanting to alienate US and Western imperialism, to which they're also still, heavily reliant on. The reality is that they've been unprincipled on this, and in the final analysis, they reflect the fact that this itself is the government of the capitalist class, is the government of the big corporations, and they are driven by the corporate interests that are invested in these blocks. What we need is a united working class movement, first and foremost, of the working class people in both Russia and Ukraine, but also international working class solidarity to oppose the war in Ukraine, but also to oppose the war in Yemen, in Palestine, and everywhere where imperialism and its wars are, of course, brutalizing the masses of the working class and the poor.
Mametlwe Sebei, thank you very much indeed, President of the General Industries Workers Union of South Africa.